We are live. Alrighty. Welcome everybody to Kitchen Sink Microscopy. We are live. And boy, is there a lot of shit to talk about today, isn't there?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
Well,
just like every day there's something new, you know.
yeah.
But we previously before this we were recording our lightning strikes twice, and the second one we kind of started getting into kind of like because I brought up the Israel striking Iran, and now they're like at war,
Mhm.
and we were speculating, I guess, that maybe there's a lot more going on than
Right.
just this little conflict, which and then kind of I think what we can discuss to some extent, if we want to make it kind of like an overarching topic, would be the shadow government,
hmm Yeah.
and which I was saying, in that episode, it's like a lot of people think that's kind of a conspiracy theory or something, but I mean, when you look into it, it's definitely fact. There's like people focus so much on the current administration, like in the US or in other countries and whatnot. But it's like, yeah, people come and go and they have different views and ideologies and things that they do. But behind that, there's a system, a bureaucratic system that persists and never changes.
Right.
And it operates for its own benefit, essentially.
Well, and
And
eventually patterns persist so much that you can't really ignore them as just noise anymore.
yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we've talked about this before where like we kind of have to separate the idea of proof being, proof in the legal sense
Mm-hmm.
versus proof in the logical sense. Like it can be blatantly obvious that something is going on, even if you don't have like, a mountain of evidence and a jury to back you up on it or anything like that. Like just
Yeah.
because it hasn't been proven in a court of law doesn't mean it's not true.
Well, yeah, and something can be partially true or
Mhm.
potentially true as well, like fuzzy logic. That's kind of how I try to look at things. It's like there's never a complete false or a complete true. There's
Right.
somewhere in between. So it's like, you could consider it like a scale, right? So you have a weight that represents truth on one side, and you put little pieces of evidence on the other side, and it can eventually get really close to truth.
Yep.
And of course, it's important to consider like what those things are and if they actually relate to things. And that's where it gets muddy as far as trying to figure things out. But the thing is, like, because we were just talking about how, like, before Israel struck Iran, there were kind of peace talks, basically trying to negotiate with Iran about their nuclear program. And I mean, that was like actively going on. And then
Right.
wham, they struck their military structures and stuff, and it's like, oh well, so is that organic? Did Israel just do that out of the blue, or was this something that's been in the works for a long time? And maybe there's powers that be that don't want peace there, that they want conflict, you
Yeah.
know and so it doesn't matter how much you struggle to try to achieve peace. There's this kind of back end system that works against that,
Right.
and
Well, and,
has the
and
means.
you look at the things going on all around the globe within the last 10 days, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
You had uh, nobody was expecting Ukraine to wake up and spank Russia so hard.
Yeah.
So, like, that really probably upset, you know, the shadow government if they do exist. And
Mm.
if they do, they're definitely operating in Russia, of
Yeah.
course.
Oh, for sure.
Uh,
And keep in mind, this would be a global system.
yeah.
And so, like, okay, why don't we just, like, what is the shadow government? And in my opinion, because obviously it's not like an official thing that you can, oh, yeah, there's that organization. It,
Mm,
it's wealthy individuals, like the elites,
right.
certain elites, not all of them, but certain elites that have an agenda.
Right.
It's big corporations, banks, military companies, that Lockheed Martin and all these guys, and Raytheon and stuff. And then you have obviously bureaucratic systems like within government,
Mhm.
like especially certain ones like the CIA or the NSA, the CIA in particular, and it's similar whatever in other countries, that they all kind of work together for in certain cases, in certain ways, and then you have like politicians in general that kind of participate for a time in that, but like it it's a system that is not like any one thing, and it's
Yeah.
not like they're see, and I don't want people, because people, when you say something like that, they have this idea of like mustache twirling evildoers, like smoking cigars in a dark room, colluding together and planning this big plan. It's not quite like that. A lot of these individuals or businesses or whatever operate in their own self-interest, but they it just so turns out that like uh, doing that, everybody kind of wins when they
Yeah.
when these things happen.
I don't know. It might actually be this shadowy cabal. I don't know if mustaches are a requirement to be in the club,
Not
but
anymore. Or monocles. It used to
yeah.
be, you know.
But it would make sense when you think about it. Like I'm under no delusion that every politician is in on this. Like
No.
that would be ridiculously hard to keep concealed. Like when
Mm-hmm.
you want to run shadow operations, the fewer people that are in the know, the better. However, of course, you do have to have people in the know in positions where they can control, um, like important arms of your operation. So
Yeah.
in
Well,
that, like, I think there is definitely grand master plans that are made, probably made quite on the fly, and just they reach out to whoever they're in control of
yeah.
and pull the puppet string.
Well, and the way they do that, so this is how you keep secrets from getting out. Compartmentalization.
Hmm.
So, like the Manhattan Project, for instance, when they were doing that, most of the people working on the Manhattan Project, and there were many, many people, it was like totally top secret. But the way they kept it from getting out is no, most of the people that worked there didn't know exactly what they were doing. Like
Yeah.
they knew they were part of a secret project, but the individuals who were working, they were only working on a piece of the project and they didn't see the big picture. So the people
Yeah.
who did know obviously were certain political figures and the physicists who were working on it and stuff like that.
I could never work a job like that.
No.
Um, I I require more transparency in what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing. And that's the very reason why I feel like I have that requirement of myself is
Mm-hmm.
that I would I would feel like shit if I found out that I was building the next thing to annihilate millions of people or something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like I would rather give up the career than be part of that and be like I was just following orders or I had no idea what was going on. It seemed fishy, sure, but I just had to put my head down and do my job. Like, no, I'm not that guy.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I agree. Yeah, it would be really I couldn't.
And that's where like I've been really disappointed lately in like the US military and like I would hope they're you know, largely made of people that are feel the same about that. Like, oh, if I'm asked to do something immoral or something that goes against the Constitution, I would rather get court-martialed than betray my country and my people and my Constitution. But, like we're seeing that the military would actually happily fuck us over. Like,
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean it boy, it is hard because like it, there's so many moving parts and
mm,
they're moving very quickly. It's impossible to really keep up with all of it. And it's
yeah,
like it's
we got to
also
try.
yeah, I mean ideally people would opt out completely. I mean join the movement. you know, like let's you know, walk away from all this stupid government shit, you know, and
Hmm.
build things as a community. Build communities, not armies, basically.
Yeah.
And that you like you so the shadow government side of things. Okay, so like I'm saying, you can't really change anything, right? You can come in there with these lofty goals of changing something as like president or whatever, but there's nothing you can do. You cannot
Right.
change if the system doesn't want it changed. You cannot change it. So why keep playing the game when the game is rigged against the general public? It's wholly rigged against the general public. Like it is a self-serving system. And like, I mean, there's even been studies on like various uh, Congress and Senate people, like the patterns of what they vote on and stuff. And basically, consistently, they side with the corporatocracy and
Oh yeah.
not with the constituents. Like 95% of the time, it's like, oh, big business, banks, whatever, the government itself, and they side with conflict rather than conflict resolution, peaceful conflict resolution. Like,
Right.
and I, I'm done. You know, like
Right.
fuck it,
Well,
I'm
there
out.
is there is hope. There was so I just heard about this today. A friend of mine, former military, was participating in one of these No Kings uh, protests, right,
Mm-hmm.
in Tacoma, and he sent me a an article. It was a study by some poli sci at Harvard, and BBC reported on this, and it they decided to do like a study on peaceful revolution versus violent revolution. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this poli sci was skeptical that peaceful revolution would be effective at all
Mm-hmm.
compared to a violent revolution, which has like a roughly 25% success rate,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually not bad. But they found that it's twice as effective as violent revolution
Mm-hmm.
if if you hit a certain percentage of the population. 3.5% of the population being actively involved in peaceful revolution is has so far in the world never not been successful.
Huh. That's
And
interesting.
and maybe it's too early to know for sure, but some of the estimates were that 11 million people participated in these No Kings protests, which is just shy of 3.5% of 340 million people.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Now here, and that's fine. That's all fine and good, but it just depends on what the goal is, which I think everybody is misguided in general when in these kinds of things. It's like we need to not say, "Oh, this system as it currently stands is bad. We want to like remove that and put another similar system in place." No, no, no. We need to be on the side of like we're going to have no system. That is what
yeah.
needs to happen. Like because it it's like the corruption. It like there's so much. It goes so deep, and like
Well, I agree with you, but I think we talked about this last week. It is possible to have governance without leaders.
mhm.
I think a system like that is exactly what we need, and it probably could actually benefit quite a bit from things like AI and crypto technology, blockchain, and all that stuff to
Yeah,
assist us in holding ourselves accountable to kind of remove power from any one individual or small group of people.
yeah.
And and if something like that were successful, I think a shadow government would really struggle to get its tendrils in.
It absolutely would. Yes, 100%.
And I
Well,
don't
and
think
when
that's impossible to do at all, especially when the protests that hit the supposed mark of being like kind of a shoe-in for success is called No Kings. I think like getting people on board with the goal of like thinking about a government with no leaders. You've got a 11 million person think tank, probably more than that really, because when other people see that it's taking hold, they're gonna like be like, oh, you know what? Like that's actually a good idea. I'm on board with that, you know? Like that's probably why over a certain threshold these are successful because once they start getting some wins, they get bigger and bigger and bigger teams and
well, but also you run into issues where it can get like contaminated with stuff that doesn't benefit the general public. Like
yeah, I mean,
it'll
it's
deviate
never going
from
to be
its
perfect, but you know, like
well, yeah. I mean, like I've kind of been paying attention to some of that, and
kind of
from
like
what
cancer and chemo. Chemo is real shit, but it does kill the cancer, you know,
well, true,
and you're
true,
still alive for quite
but
a while, probably, you know.
actinium 225 therapy is far more effective because it's like laser focused on the exact, like targeting the exact cancer itself. But anyway, like, and that's, I guess what I'm thinking. It's like to me, what I'm observing, um, is that it's more this movement is more focused on just, well, we don't like this thing and we want this thing to go away. There isn't a plan for like anything beyond that, really. It's more
That's
just
where
like,
kitchen sink my crust becomes in.
well, yes, true. And you know, there are movements though. There's a lot of really widely watched and respected people who are kind of like pushing more for kind of what I'm talking about, like the community, like which goes in line with this other movement to an extent. But like when you have a distributed system, like where it everybody's working together, kind of collectively, but they're sort of it's smaller pockets of communities that are all sort of in, you know, like for instance, you could say Tacoma, right, or whatever. Tacoma can be its own community that operates completely independently, forms its own rules and stuff like that, but cooperates with Lakewood and Seattle and whatnot, and but they're their own communities too, and there's nothing beyond that. Like that's all you need,
Yeah.
and then you just have some kind of I guess like any kind of high level sort of thing, like a federal sort of side would be more just to make sure everybody's getting along and not like doing stupid shit. Or maybe also because there's things like if there is a natural disaster that affects like the entire country, you do need something to coordinate that, or to
Exactly.
coordinate like FEMA. I think FEMA is a good organization if it were kind of cleaned up a little bit, because
Hmm.
like how do you look at Hurricane Katrina, right?
Yeah.
FEMA dropped the ball on that. That was really bad, but people wanted to come help. And how do you coordinate all that? Like all the first responders, people supplying supplies, all the whatever cleanup and
Yeah.
finding people and so it's like you do need that. Or what if, I don't know, another country invades a country, right? Okay, well, sure, you have the militia, which is everybody, but how do you organize that when you need to organize now? You know, the
Yeah.
the Canadians are crossing the border. We need everybody to get up here. How do you organize that? You know,
Yeah.
like I don't think that would happen, but like, but it could. Something akin to that could happen.
Hmm.
So there should be some kind of organizational hierarchy, I guess, or something like where people, it's just like, okay, the federal side is just sort of, and you know, there's sort of courts, right, to settle disputes, also coordinate whole country, whatever it is. But beyond that, whatever, you know. I think the communities themselves can operate independently, and at that point, you would, it'd be really difficult to have any kind of corruption come in,
Yeah.
because it would be limited in scope to just the one community. So like Tacoma could get corrupted, but that corruption wouldn't bleed over into Seattle because Seattle's its own community or whatever. And then you
Right.
don't even need states at that point. You just have the
No.
whole country.
Yeah, and that I think would be the hardest part to get a system like that off the ground is removing all of the programming from the the population of the US
Yeah.
in thinking that politics is a two-color system,
Yeah.
like total binary. It's either this or that.
Well, that's by design, right? Like
Yeah, of
that
course it
is
is.
like
And that's why I say programming. It's a constant struggle to not get caught in that kind of thinking
mhm.
in the US. Um,
Well,
and
yeah,
most people aren't even struggling. They're just happily going with it, you know?
yeah, they've been programmed and conditioned to. Well, and
Mhm.
a really good illustration. I saw this cartoon once, um, that was brilliant because it exactly highlights what I'm talking about here. There's a building, and it's kind of like cutaway. So you like there's no roof, but there's like two doors. One, it says left and right, and there's these cows walking into the left and right, and then they join in the middle to a larger room that's the slaughterhouse.
Yep.
So it's like that's my point. Is like it doesn't matter how you vote, you're going to
Yeah.
end up with basically the same outcome, maybe with just slightly different flavoring, you know,
Hmm.
and the same potential for bad shit to happen, you know, and rarely does good shit happen. That's the thing. It's like that when we participate in politics, very rarely does anything actually good come out of it. And so why not, why don't we make it ourselves? Like, because for instance too, why do we need somebody on like here, say in Washington state, why do we need people in Washington DC to be deciding what we do over here? Like they don't even, they've never even been here, most of them. Like they don't know. And it's the same thing with like even just Washington itself. The western side of Washington and the eastern side of Washington have different needs and wants and different cultures. And you know, like, so why have one whole state? Why not just have communities that naturally form, and they know what they need and they make it happen?
Yeah.
Like, and overall, like the biggest, the federal side of things would just be to ensure that everybody is cooperating. Like you can
Right.
have.
And somebody last week had mentioned along those lines that tax revenue is an important
Mhm,
uh, part of all of that, preventing something like that from happening.
mhm,
But the more I think about that, the more I go back to the fact that like I do really feel like money is something that also really needs to be addressed, and that I really think there's, somewhere between no need for it and a definite need for at least some different version of commerce,
mhm. Well,
Um,
and you could.
because you can't just flip a switch and be like, oh yeah, no more money. Like even
No,
Star Trek didn't really do that,
exactly, yeah.
So, like that, I think would have to, or at least should
Mhm.
happen hand in hand because like what better time to implement changes than when you're just starting over from scratch with everything,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, like kind of build things together so that they work together and have kind of like a cohesive goal
Yeah.
so that one's not really working against the other, you know?
Well, and like I had mentioned at the end of the lightning strikes twice about the shadow government. They're playing the long game. I
Hmm.
mean, this is like we're talking multiple generations of individuals and organizations and things like that that are all they're not interested in change immediately. It's like this is no, this is something that's slow, so you
Yeah.
don't even really notice that it's changing. And so, well, why not fight fire with fire? Because I don't
Yeah.
believe we'd ever be like you had mentioned. There's all this social conditioning and things, and people have they believe certain things about stuff, and they're following the herd essentially. And I don't think you can change that overnight. But what we can do is start planting seeds so that
Yeah.
future generations can take up that mantle with a good set of tools in their toolbox and a really solid plan. And like that's where discussing these things comes in to play,
Right.
is that like, you know, it'd be foolhardy to charge forward with no plan and not having any real idea of how to implement something. No, we need to slowly and methodically put together a plan and get the word out and get people to start thinking differently about things. And you know, because it's like, well, kind of like my journey to atheism and anarchism wasn't overnight. It wasn't like I just saw one video or read a book and all of a sudden this light bulb went off. No, it took a long, long time. And, you know, there were moments of clarity where it's like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But it took, the lead up to that was many, many, many layers of understanding, like coming to an understanding of things. And at one point it was kind of like, oh yeah, okay, I think I'm there now. And so that's the thing, like we need to be having discussions with people and coming up with plans, and also raising awareness about a lot of things, I think. I mean, it's very easy to start, I guess, with the idea of just not participating as much as you can, which is what I do. Obviously,
Yeah.
I still got to pay taxes and I still got to follow the rules and stuff.
Well,
But like,
this shadow government, I almost guarantee you, if its existence is real, it's not a government like the way we think of government. It's
mhm.
probably more like what we're talking about, what we need to do.
Yeah,
Like, of
yeah,
course, it's there's not like an Emperor Palpatine like single-handedly running the show on planet Earth.
mhm.
It's just the people who have the money to get the things they want realize that if they work with other people that have lots of money, it's much easier because like it's an undeniable fact that there are things that can't be done alone. You
Yeah,
have to have systems for them. And
yeah.
the shadow government fully understands and embraces that
Mhm.
and uses their elite system to have the cushiest fucking life possible, you
Which,
know?
yeah, and to be able to control, because
Yeah.
a lot of people, these people, they get off on controlling other people and
Hmm.
being in charge. And well, and so that's the thing. It's like they are following this plan to benefit themselves at the, you know, expense, I guess, of other people, of us. So we would want to craft a system that is facing the other direction, that benefits the people, that is basically truly of the people and for the people,
Yeah.
you know, like. And the only way we can do that is to have a system where it doesn't matter if you're an elite, you don't have any influence any more than anybody else. And I mean, yeah, I guess if you have a bunch of money, you could do cool shit like start up you know, a space program of your own. It's like, okay, well, honestly, I think that's cool. That's a good use of money because it's like, oh yeah, okay, that's an awesome thing. But when it
Mhm.
comes down to waging war or something, you know, that, no, that's not good. And
What we're
controlling the
what,
public, like not allowing people to come to their potential, their true potential, thwarting people, keeping them down. I mean, all this bureaucratic red tape is there to do that very thing.
yeah.
And maybe initially it wasn't intended to be that way, but now, well, it's a tool that can be like a weapon that can be wielded for that purpose, to that end.
Yeah, what we're
And of course,
talking about here is social anarchism.
mm-hmm,
Like we've touched on that many times before, where socialism and anarchism have quite a bit in common,
mm-hmm.
or let's say they can,
They can, yeah,
and yeah, I looked it up, and there is actually like a movement for that that sees individual liberty and social solidarity as mutually compatible and desirable. It
yeah,
advocates for social revolution to eliminate hierarchical power structures such as capitalism and the state. And that's sort of what we're talking about, like
yeah, mm-hmm,
deconstruct the idea of government, deconstruct the idea of money as we know it, like
mm-hmm.
and just operate as communities and get along with each other. Like,
Yeah.
how hard is that, you know?
Well, and you know what? That's what human beings have been doing forever. That's
Hmm.
like that is innate in our DNA essentially that we want to help other people. We want to
Yeah.
cooperate because that's survival. The
Hmm.
ones who don't help and don't cooperate don't survive,
Yeah.
you
Like
know?
I feel like we're close enough now to a paradigm shift where the state of the economy all over the world has
Yeah.
become such to the point where like there's so much of a majority of people that know 100% assuredly they will never have enough money to even be comfortable, much less rich.
Mm-hmm.
So like the idea of getting rid of money altogether becomes a lot easier to imagine when you can see that there's clearly enough infrastructure in the world for things to just work, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And just because money runs the world now doesn't mean that it's like dilithium crystals or something. There's not like some inherent power in the paper that we print that like gives off this radiation that makes things go, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
We
exactly.
look for things that make things go.
Was that the Packleds? Who?
Aclids, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, always Star Trek. Well, yeah, and like I think I would say it's not worth trying to necessarily craft a system like a replacement, but it's because we don't know what that'll look like allow the masses to craft that together, right? People to figure something out.
Balkanized commerce probably makes sense.
What's that?
Balkanizing
Yeah,
commerce
well, yeah.
probably makes sense, you know.
And I mean, in a way, it's sort of like, well, we had a long time ago a one world currency, and that was gold and silver. And I mean, we could do crypto or something, but like, I think having something that's beyond the control of any system is good because it's like, well, we can mine gold, but well, currently we can't just turn lead into gold, you know. It can't be crafted out of nothing. Or so it's like something like that. And like if I have gold, I have it, right? I can
Yeah.
You can be like, oh, give me, so much gold for this, and I could be like, yeah, I have that, and I'll give you that. But nobody else can like control that.
Yeah.
Whereas like with fiat currency or even certain digital currencies and stuff like that, if any, it's centrally controlled. So it's like somebody can manipulate that very, very easily. Like the value of the dollar compared to other currencies. I mean, countries do that all the time, fiddling with the value essentially. Um, and of course, it always works the way we don't want it to work, where the money you have becomes less valuable, and the people at the top benefit in one way or another from that. And well, why would we want to use a system like that? I
Yeah.
want a system where it's like, hey, it's always consistent, and it's immune to manipulation. Because there's another factor for corruption too, because it's
Yeah.
the manipulators who are also playing part of that game, and they because the system is able to be messed with, well, they take advantage of that to their benefit,
Yeah.
and that's bullshit. I think that's totally bullshit.
You know, it would be a good idea for movements like this to branch out of their own countries
Mm-hmm.
and and start forming collaborations independently of everything else, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there are a lot of moving parts to stuff, like just looking at money alone, like that's crept its way into everything.
Mm-hmm.
But one major thing that it kind of powers is power.
Yeah,
Um, like energy and stuff like that. And there's Korea, I want to say South Korea just had kind of a breakthrough with like energy conduction that was like zero loss,
Mm-hmm.
like completely conserved energy, which is huge,
That's
right? Like
massive. That is,
like
yeah.
so much is lost to heat,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they lost nothing. And like, how much of a game changer would that be as far as cost savings? Like,
Sure. Well,
you
and
know,
this is where a community based system, instead of it being locked down where only, a small group of individuals or a country or a company have access to that, it's like, oh, when you have an open source world, now everybody can take advantage of that revelation.
right?
And yeah, like that's a good thing. And human beings do that on their own. It's just the problem is all this conditioning that people feel like, I mean, if you, most people feel like, oh, this is the only way to do things, the way I've been told, the way I grew up, the way my parents did things, this is the only way. And the system propagandizes people all the time about like, oh my God, if we got rid of that, yeah, the whole world, the sky would fall, and it's like, no, it wouldn't. There was a time before that existed and everybody was fine. And there could be a time after that when it doesn't exist and everybody be fine.
Yeah.
Like it it isn't necessary to have this bureaucracy or this political structure, because they always, this is the, I mean, you can look back through time, even just in like the US, for instance. I mean, I grew up here, you grew up here, so it's like a good example. But like, think of all the politicians and all the promises they've made. Have they ever kept anything? I mean, like in any kind of big significant way. I mean, everybody's been promising the same shit forever and ever,
Yeah.
and like, oh, we're gonna make it better. It's gonna get better. It's gonna get better, and it never does.
The metric to look at is um the effort, because it's not like any one person in government can, well, should be able
Yeah,
to make
yeah,
things happen just by their will. Um, like
no,
they
but
they do have to go through a process and stuff, but there are definitely like, I mean, I've seen plenty of politicians, Trump included, do things that they said they would do.
mm-hmm.
Um, and like Obama and stuff, but Obama also kind of went back on his word on things that he would do, like especially in the second term, it tends to be where they just kind of go rogue,
Yeah,
um, and do whatever, whether or
yeah,
not they're getting, co-opted by the shadow government, or they're just selfish or whatever it might be.
mm-hmm.
Um, that just
Well,
seems to be kind of the case. Like,
it is, it
better
is.
better argument for term limits. Just
Yeah,
saying.
especially for like the other, like Congress and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so well, and that's kind of what I was getting at earlier about like the shadow government, that you can't do things that the shadow government, or the bureaucracy doesn't want to happen.
Right.
It'll only happen if they, and so what they'll do too is they'll give you like a little, to dip your toes into the pool. Basically, they'll give you just a little nugget of what they said they were going to do, right? or they'll do something that appears on the surface to be what they said, but the reality of which is completely different, and
Yeah.
certainly isn't in our best interest, like our being everybody, like the populace.
Mm.
And so and that's where it's like, okay, well, the only way out of that I can think of, and the easiest way, I suppose, and the one that's the least amount of bloodshed, is indifference. Like, and but combined with community involvement. So right, we just turn our back on the system and we just start doing things on our own at whatever we can do, and eventually that system will wither because nobody's playing the game anymore.
I I don't know if I agree with at least the definition of indifference though. Like, I really feel like it's important to care
Mm-hmm.
about like your fellow humans and what's happening, what they're going through, not just your own struggles, but like and indifference in an active sense or lack of activity, I guess is the
Yeah,
better
yeah.
term.
Lack of participation.
Is kind of how like existing systems thrive, you know, without any resistance whatsoever. You're just allowing the bad shit to continue
Well,
rather
no,
than
no, no, no.
actively doing something to remove it. Like
I'm
you can't
talking.
remove something by doing nothing.
Yes, you can.
How?
If okay, look, if everybody just today decided to stop paying taxes and not use any government service, never vote ever again, and we were just like, yeah, we're just going to do it for ourselves. Well,
How do you stop paying taxes? It comes out automatically. You have no control over that.
well, but you no, a company that they're the ones that are playing along with the system. If you run your own business, you actively have to pay taxes. It
Hmm.
doesn't come out automatically. And but that's the point. Is like I'm not really talking about like, oh, we'll flip a switch and oh, magically everything's going to change. No, this is the long game aspect of it, where we need to get people to start thinking in a different way about things. To like, okay, you can still participate, you can still maybe vote and get out there and be political, but also recognize at the same time that you want to make that diminish, right? To make it go away.
Yeah. Well,
It's like for instance, I can go to church, um, but if everybody stopped going to church, churches would go away. You know,
right. Um, hmm, yeah. I mean, that's a little different though. Like tithing is entirely uh optional.
yeah,
It's not like if you stop tithing, then the church will come with guns and,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
like
yeah, exactly.
so like even if you're a big corporation, it's not like you have the power to just be like, "Hey, we're not paying tax anymore," because the government will squish you.
Well, that's
Um,
that's true. But if you start changing the mindset of people, eventually, even the enforcers will have the same mindset, and they won't enforce anymore. Or you could be active in politics and get into politics as somebody who's like basically wants to be a monkey wrench in the system and like try to kill it from within. Obviously, that's very difficult because the system is designed to corrupt. So you could have the best of intentions and go into politics and you will eventually be corrupted. It's like a friend of mine who he joined the army and went into the Rangers. So he was a ranger. And he told me he read this book about like brainwashing, and he's like, I want you to check me and make sure I don't get brainwashed.
mm,
And like we would send letters back and forth and stuff like that. And the last letter that he sent, basically at the end, he's like, "Yeah, I think they got me. I think I'm brainwashed now." But it's like, yeah, see, it doesn't matter who you are. The system is designed to maintain its power at all costs. But I don't know. I mean, I don't like the idea of there being like this, I don't know, like violent revolution or fast revolution doesn't necessarily end with the benefit of the people.
right. Uh, yeah, let's talk about that. I'm actively in the process of putting a link to this BBC article with the Harvard study in the description for
Ah,
anyone watching. They can read this at their leisure. But the, the concept of peaceful versus violent revolution. Let's talk for a moment about this article and how they delineated between those.
mm-hmm.
If there was any kind of military involvement in whatever the goal was. Like a regime change is
Mhm.
usually kind of the usual goal.
That's pretty common.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. With India, like Mahatma Gandhi and stuff, there was like a weak but still present British military um, involvement in that. So they didn't count that as a peaceful win. But when like I said before about like evidence, right? Like the peaceful part of that was a huge one. So this success rate is probably even stronger than we're, scientifically allowing ourselves to consider it to be.
Yeah.
Like I've basically had a change of mind here because like this is a great moment to point out on the show, like a change of mind. Like
Hmm.
even as of yesterday, I thought like, you know what, like this is going to come to a violent revolution. It has to,
Hmm.
um, because the military isn't even siding with the people. So what else can you do? And it may still come to that, but you're not going to get much success without the peaceful part, at
Yes.
least to bring people on board with it. If it comes to, push comes to shove, of course, violence will be necessary. And I think a lot of the regime changes that come out of, the 25% success rate of violent revolutions didn't get there just with, oh, let's jump to violence.
Yeah.
There probably was at least some effort, uh, where people were like, hey, please listen, to our plea.
Hmm.
And when that falls on deaf ears, of course, people get angry,
Yeah.
and that's justified.
At least, at the very least, very frustrated.
Yeah. And that's healthy. Like I don't buy into the stoicism stuff where like you should push that away or equate positive or negativity with emotion. Like if you're angry, it means there's something wrong. There's something not right.
Well, I mean, it depends on your perception, of course.
Well,
Because some people will get angry about certain things and not others, and vice versa. And like,
but
and
it's
it
all
depends on.
cumulative.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
but it.
the straw that breaks the camel's back could be something really small, and in the moment you're like, "What the fuck?"
It's but
Like that's
people
not a
get
big deal. But
there. My point is like people get angry about different things,
mhm.
and so what angers you may not anger me. And maybe I get angry about something or frustrated about something, and you're like, well, why is that even a big deal? You know, and so it's like that's tough to have something like that be coordinated, and I don't know. I just
Yeah.
don't like the idea of, well, because one of the problems too with movements that are kind of centrally organized is that uh, I I don't know. It's a matter of like very intelligently and logically looking at exactly what is wrong and exactly why,
Well,
and then come up with a plan of what to do about it. I mean, it's basic troubleshooting essentially.
those are two different things, though. Like it's not as complicated as you're making it. The hard part comes after the easy part. The easy part is identifying what's broken.
Yeah,
That's objective, really.
sure, sure.
Like,
But I'm
you
saying the
know,
why. The why is the thing too. Like, what is causing it to be broken?
yeah, I mean, you have to look at all of that, but um, it doesn't really do any good to be like, why is there a hole in the boat? We can't plug it until we know why. Like,
Well, that's a
that's the thing I always find ridiculous about this is like, oh, we have to have more information. No, it's
well,
like fucking plug the thing
well,
and
no,
then figure it out,
that's crisis response. That's a little bit different. But of course, in crisis response, the first step is to remain calm. Like begin by remaining calm. Otherwise, you're going to make mistakes. That's the last thing you want is to make mistakes. So start step one, remain calm.
Hmm.
But like in troubleshooting, yeah, my point is like it's important to know the why because how do you fix it? How you fix it is dictated by why in a lot of cases Because if you think that the cause of a thing is one thing and you go after that, and it turns out that has nothing to do with it, or maybe it goes deeper, there's more factors at play. Well, now you haven't fixed it. You've just spun your wheels, doing nothing, maybe even causing damage, um, and you still haven't fixed it. So that the why is absolutely critical,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah.
and that comes
So
down to knowledge. You have to study things essentially, like learn how things work,
the,
and that kind of thing.
the people that are lucky enough to be removed from situations that are causing them pain or anger or frustration, if they're truly people of empathy, they should be allies to those who are angry. They should be helping them. They should be able to objectively recognize, yeah, that person has right to say, you know what, this is wrong, this is fucked up. Because if you look at like the system in America, I say this time and again, everyone can agree it's fucked.
Yeah.
You know, like it doesn't matter how you define fucked, it's broken, you know?
Well, of course,
So
but
like
if you
that should
want
be
to,
like something that everybody can come together on, whether they're pissed off or not. It's
yes.
something that really shouldn't just be left to stew, you know?
No, of course not, for sure. And I mean, there's probably at least dozens of things that everybody can agree are like major problems.
Hmm.
But my point here is it's really important to know the why, know what the causes are, so you can address those causes. Because it's like the amount of effort required. If, for instance, like, okay, let's say there's something wrong with your car, it's making a weird noise, right? And you're like, you have no idea how cars work. So, but maybe you don't have a mechanic, you just have a book and stuff, and you're like, well, okay, it's making a noise. I guess I'll just replace this thing. And you replace it, and it's still making the noise. So, okay, I'll go replace another thing, and it's still making the noise. And pretty soon, you've spent all this money and time replacing shit you didn't even need to replace, because it turns out it's just this one thing. And if you knew how the machine worked, you'd be able to target that one thing that is at the heart of it all. And I think that
But
applies
the whole
to,
engine might break down in the time that you're researching that, you know, like
well,
whereas it's
perhaps
not entirely useless to do what you were talking about because it's a process of elimination for one thing.
it
Like,
is.
okay, changing that did nothing, or changing that did a little bit of something, so maybe I'm on the right track. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like it can give you more and more information about
Well,
where the root cause or
this this
causes
this is
might
true,
be.
but my point is, like, you can,
Scientific method,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, of course, and that's part of troubleshooting as well, which is pretty much the scientific method in a way. Uh,
Yeah.
but like, I guess what I'm getting at is it it isn't, well, for one, it's not that difficult to find out information if you're objectively looking things up, and trying to find actually where your goal is to actually know the truth, like what is the actual truth, regardless of how I feel about things. It's like, well, it's like, kind of, I'm an atheist, but if it turns out that there's something comes up and it's like, oh wow, God actually exists, I'm not going to remain an atheist. I'm going to be like, oh, I
Right.
guess God's real, or ghosts, or cryptids, or something, like, oh well, maybe Bigfoot actually exists because somebody found Bigfoot. But the thing is, like, with a car, or with the car analogy, which is usually a pretty useful one, I mean, you can do some research, you can ask questions of other people. um I mean, hopefully you would be well read and studied enough to be able to reason your way through a problem, because that's part of like the universal troubleshooting process, is that you don't need to know the thing that you're troubleshooting, you just have to be able to follow a particular process to solve the problem. And so it's like, you don't necessarily have to be totally familiar, intimately familiar with the system to be able to analyze it. And so it's not like, it's, I guess it depends on what the situation is. And you also, too, like, if you're talking systemic things, it's like, well, you have to also weigh how big of a problem something is, like, and that's hard because obviously that's kind of subjective in some ways. um but I guess you can Google that, essentially, is my point. Right now we have the technology. It's not going to take that much time to figure something out. Although one of the problems, especially when
Then
it
there's
comes to,
critical thinking involved in that and stuff. And
yes,
it's like,
of course.
like don't get lost in the weeds too much because like, like I said, you gotta kind of got to look at the big picture rather than micromanage everything and, you know, be overly concerned about whether or not you're doing things the correct way or going in the correct direction. Like it, if you're in a shitty situation, and that much is objectively clear, even if you end up in a different shitty situation, the transition is uh, kind of a wavering point where like even the most powerful shadow government would be caught unawares and have to make real-time adjustments. And that that's powerful. Um, I think that's why we're seeing so much chaos right now,
Yeah,
like following the Ukraine thing with the drones and the Trojan horse attack, like and now all of a sudden, like boom, Iran and um, I feel like a lot of that stuff is very reactionary and like, oh shit, that's not part of the plan. Now what? You know,
it is powerful, but it's also
yeah,
hollow because it will never solve the problem unless you do the right things. And like you're saying, if you end up in a different shitty situation, well, okay, maybe this one is a small pile of shit, but the next one is a huge pile of shit. And now you're swimming in it. Like, that's where I'm saying it's important to go in the correct direction and know your enemy, essentially.
yeah,
Um,
but I mean, what are the odds though? Like hindsight is 2020, but if yeah, I mean, there's just as good a chance that you end up in a better situation. Like
yeah.
you can't really operate on the fact that like, oh, because it might get worse, however small a risk that might be, I'm just not going to do anything,
Oh, well,
you know?
of course not. But like, my point is, it takes effort and time and potential risk to do
Right.
anything like that. And so why not plan plan
Yeah.
your attack rather than just jump in head first, unaware of like the potential outcome. When you could just take a little bit of time to plan. I mean, if you're controlling an army and you're attacking or defending or whatever, like, it won't behoove you. It certainly wouldn't. Like, you could be like, well, we might win, we also might lose, but let's just attack. Well, okay, but why don't we just look at the battlefield, look at the situation, analyze the enemy's troops and their gear and then maybe even like observe the way they do things so that we can come up with a way to counter that or take them by surprise or whatever. um I mean, that it's really important to plan and to have a really good uh direction,
Well,
sense
okay.
of direction, rather than just like, oh, like going back to, well, for one, with cars, the consequences of just kind of randomly changing parts is like money and time, and maybe like bloody knuckles or something, um and but like, and okay, well, that's just on you, right? But when you're talking about social change, that's much bigger than just a car, and that affects everybody.
Well, yeah, the car analogy does not work with systems like we're talking about because, it's a great analogy with just two minor drawbacks. And that would be that trying to have such a sophisticated goal with so many people all working toward that one very specific goal
Hmm.
is literally impossible. Um,
Yeah,
like, how would you organize that? How would you organize that without it being infiltrated by the powers that be?
yeah.
You can't. Like that's why the goal has to be very simple, very direct, very straightforward. Remove leader X. Then
Well,
we figure out the next steps from there. But like,
but you have a system that is built around having leader X or Y being there.
I
So
know
who, because what will happen is now somebody else will take
JD
that
Vance
place.
steps up, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
or
how
whatever,
it would happen, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
and so it's like, well, that's kind of pointless, isn't it?
well, no, not necessarily, because you don't know what happens then. Like, JD Vance used to be a Democrat. All of a sudden, he's like, after talking shit about Trump, he's now Trump's vice president. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think this guy is like somebody who isn't easily swayed? Like, if he all of a sudden falls into a system of power or, a place of power after his predecessor was just removed by a clear majority of people who are pissed off with the way things were going, do you think he's going to be like, all right, we're going to keep doing things the way Trump was doing it?
Well, I
Probably
think,
not.
wouldn't it be better to have to work towards uh, cracking the system that allows any one person to do, like, why would you want to
Of
live?
course it would be, but it would be like a futile effort
No, it wouldn't.
comparatively.
No. You could affect change quite well by enough people being involved in something
I mean,
for
here's the
that
thing
something to
that
change.
can happen simultaneously. It doesn't have to be either or. This doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be like, oh, let's just remove leader X or let's just sit and think of a plan and try to find a way to make hundreds of millions of people come together on it. It can actually kind of like all come together in one movement,
Well, you
like
get
in
enough
real
people.
time.
Here's the thing: you get enough minds working on something, and it doesn't take that much time to come up with something. Like you've seen the like Reddit or 4chan effect of where a bunch of random people online like solve crimes and locate somebody or a missing person or solve a mystery in record time. Something that maybe people have been struggling with for decades, and someone posts something, and like 100 people come in,
But
and
who
you
committed
know,
the crime?
huh?
Who committed the crime that they solved? One,
Well,
maybe two people.
well, no, but I'm saying like coming up with an answer is my point.
Yeah.
They do that all the time, and
But my
it's like,
point is like the problem that you're focused on isn't masterminded by one person. Like there's a team of people that have a lot more power and sway to get their tendrils into things and kind of squash efforts like that before they even get off the ground.
mhm.
And that's definitely happening.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think
Like it's
this.
not like it's a complete futile effort and it shouldn't be worked toward, but I think it has to be worked toward in the long game. Like they play the long game, you have to play the long game too. You can't take a long game goal and then plan to have it be like a surgical strike. You
No,
have to
but
have a surgical strike be like take a tumor out, not cure the entire disease at once.
yes, and but the point is, you have your long game, and then every action you take has to follow that long game.
Yeah.
That's the point. Is like there has to be some kind of structure, some plan in place before anything happens, and you got to like basically pass it through that filter. Is like, oh, is this part of that strategy? If
Well,
not, don't do it yet. Put it on the shelf. If it is, go ahead and and
but
be
see the fact that
methodical.
you and I talk about this stuff
Mm-hmm.
on this show and we bounce ideas back and forth and
Mm-hmm.
we occasionally get input from viewers and what we effectively build is a think tank.
Mm-hmm.
Like people like you and me should actually be actively involved in like kind of leading a charge on this so that once actual change is beginning to take place, we have a voice that can be heard
Mm-hmm.
by many and say, look, now we're making some progress. This is the direction we think things should be going.
Mhm.
Keep the conversation open. Like,
Of
hey,
course, yeah.
what does everybody think about that?
Well, and
And
yeah, yeah, involve the community. I think all things should be like
yeah,
crowdsourced, essentially.
it's like I don't disagree with what you're saying, but it's just that like we kind of have to blend the plans
Hmm.
into one thing because like either one on their own is of course haphazard
Hmm.
and will fail in one way or the other, even if they make some progress, like
Yeah,
some incremental progress. Like the two coming together is really what you need to make a real effectual change.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it's also, I think, probably a good idea to analyze things and ask the question: is this what they wanted all along? Like, if
Yeah.
your own actions, is that part of the plan? Like, they're doing this so that you go and do the thing they want you to do for some reason, right? Like, that, are you just a patsy? Is that something to ask as well? Because that is certainly part of the shadow government. Dude, it's,
I feel like that's a bit of a stretch.
well, it can be
Just
though.
like the geographical reach of such a machination
Mm-hmm.
would be so like I mean you'd have to be God, right?
Yeah.
To make that like not just your end goal, but something that actually plays out the way you want it to play out.
Mm-hmm.
Way too many moving parts for that to be true, I think.
Perhaps.
I meet that idea with a lot of skepticism.
Well, no,
Um,
but I'm saying it happens.
big
It has
stuff
happened.
like country versus country. Yeah.
Well, no, internal revolutions and things that like the CIA, just look at their playbook over the course of the last like half century or more. Um, like, so many things that have happened are things that are the product of the seeds that they planted in various places, and they
Yeah.
wanted that to happen so that they can come in and do the things they want to do that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. It's like the what they classic people call it the Hegelian dialectic, but that's not really the case. But essentially, it's the problem, reaction, solution thing. Um, and so that's my point. Is like, anytime you start feeling emotion, that's the time you should start getting skeptical, because
Eh,
what, you know, I'm not saying you should dismiss it, but you should ponder those
yeah.
things and be like, well, wait, why am I angry? Why am I feeling these emotions?
Right.
Because maybe it's somebody decided they wanted you to feel that, or whatever. And yes,
Uh,
I understand sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, but sometimes it's not. You know, it's like,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like definitely think about like what the source of the direct source of the anger is, you know, like if it's a news story, okay, but if it's like your own personal experience in life, like yeah, like how likely is it that the shadow government chose you and constructed things so that you would lose your job and your dog would die and blah blah blah. Like all
well, yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
things come together,
No,
you
no,
know,
I'm
like no.
not talking about like the tinfoil hat, like, oh, they're out there watching me, that kind of thing. Like, nah, you're probably not that important as an individual
Hmm.
to even be worth the effort of the system. But yeah, well, and see, it doesn't even have to be the shadow government. It could also be opportunistic individuals who will hop onto that parade and start directing it the way they want it to go. So that we have to have caution about as well. And that happens all the time. I mean, look at any of the major things that have happened somewhat recently, like Occupy Wall Street or whatever, that, you know, the Tea Party, like, though they got co-opted by people who had their own agenda that was completely separate from the original plan. And, you know, maybe it could, of course, you didn't see, you saw that those went nowhere, but they were gaining a lot of momentum, and then all of a sudden, poof, they fizzled out.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, what if that happens?
Right.
How do you guard against that from happening?
Well, okay, so what was it, yesterday or the day before? Uh, Two Minnesota lawmakers were gunned down. One died, and
Mm-hmm.
her husband, and then
Yeah, I
the
heard about
other
that.
and his wife were injured.
Yeah.
Um, but there was instantly conspiracy theories going
Mm-hmm.
on both sides of the fence there. Like
Yeah.
I saw, people saying like, oh, well, now in Minnesota, the Democratic majority is no longer there in the lawmaking system. Um,
Mm.
so so it was definitely the Republicans.
Yeah.
And then I saw another guy, um, a friend of mine who initially said, you know what, like they kind of sided with the Republicans and voted against this thing that the governor Tim Walz wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's that. But then today he messaged me and he was like, you know what, I think I was wrong. Um, and it looks like he's just kind of like a lunatic, but they did find him with like all these no kings flyers. And I was like, well, yeah, but you remember 5 years ago in Seattle when they found that off-duty police officers were inciting all the looting and the vandalism to make it look like,
Yep.
the
The,
people that were pissed off
the,
about George
the,
Floyd getting killed
the
were
black
the
bloc
ones causing it,
people,
like
black bloc
false
people.
flag
Yeah.
shit,
Well, yeah,
like
it could also be a false flag, but yeah, it could also just be a crazy guy.
yeah,
I mean, that's possible. It's just like the timing, I suppose, is coincidental, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's connected to anything else.
right.
So yeah, it's like that's
Like
where critical
there's
thinking.
motive on either side of the fence, and
Sure.
you know what? Like this is a good point to stop and think, is there a fence?
I, there shouldn't be. There really
No,
shouldn't
there
be.
isn't. Like if the shadow government wanted that to be, to
Mhm.
make both sides of the fence angry at each other,
Yeah.
hmm.
Well, yeah, and that's where we should.
And these are real human beings
Exactly.
dying and getting injured
Yeah, exactly.
for all this political theater. Like,
Well, and I think that's whenever those things happen, we need to step back and like you said, is there a fence? There shouldn't be in this case. It's like, yeah, it, it actually almost is. It offends their souls when we take their death and politicize it and
yeah.
make that the focus when it should just be, oh shit, that's a really tragic thing. That's terrible.
Yeah,
Like
these are state
I
and
saw
local lawmakers. They're not part of the shadow government
no,
cabal.
no,
Definitely,
no. And
like,
because I saw like a news video on YouTube that popped up about that, and I watched it. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And scrolling through the comments, there were a lot of people who were just like, oh man, that's tragic. But then you saw mudslinging start happening,
yeah.
where it was like the blue team versus red team, and people are like at each other's throats in the
And
comments. And I'm
most
like,
of those are bots. Like,
yeah, I probably, yeah. But it's like, that's exactly what they want. They
hmm
want people to fight. Because, like, when we fight, we can't organize.
right.
We can't work together because why would I work with you? I don't want your dirty Klingon blood in me, you know?
Well,
Like,
I'll tell you the most effective thing I've found in combating that is, when I'm railing against something that I think is wrong,
mhm,
based on my own principles, right?
yeah.
And someone comes along and gives me a politicized argument,
Mhm,
I find the common ground. They're all like, oh, but the Democrats. And I'm like, yeah, the Democrats are shit too.
yeah.
And
Yep.
that instantly brings it down a notch.
Mhm,
And before you know it, we're on the same level. Like that's the thing to do rather than being like, yeah, well, both sides are shitty. It's better to be like, yeah, isn't that fucked up?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like it's better to rather than to diminish somebody's reaction to something, it's better to like commiserate with them and
That's
be
like,
like,
that's
you know what?
basically,
Yeah, that is fucked up.
that's conversational Aikido.
Yeah.
essentially. You're just redirecting their energy towards like well, I mean, ideally it would be towards like some kind of discussion and peaceful whatever end.
Hmm.
But well, yeah, and I see that all the time where I get people try to pigeonhole me because I have a particular view on things, and it's like no, I'm you know, I'm an outsider, man.
Hmm.
You know, and that diffuses things too, because it's like, especially if like I'm in a conversation with somebody and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm an anarchist, that like it's just like pops that bubble immediately, because it's like, well, what do you got now? You can't yell at me for being a Republican or a Democrat or conservative or liberal or whatever, because I'm none of those. You know, like, oh shit, well, all your ad hominem shit just disappeared, so now all that's left is the conversation.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
can still do that even if you have a political leaning.
yeah. Like, well, okay. So it's not that the binary thing is 100% made up, right?
Yeah.
Like these are real issues with real opinions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever those land in this false dichotomy,
Mm-hmm.
sure, you could be lumped into that group,
Yeah.
but that doesn't define you.
Nope.
And that's the important part. Like people define each other based on that,
Mm-hmm.
but more often than not, people that I talk to, even if they seem like they're hardline left or right, they identify as somewhere in the middle.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, yeah,
Because it's not one or the other.
it's much more
Nobody
nuanced.
wants to be simplified down to that,
No,
like,
no. Well, some people have nothing better to do with their lives than be that identity, right? They don't have their own identity apart from their politics or whatever, which is sad. And that's something
hmm
that probably needs to be worked on, because it's a lot more nuanced than just that. Human beings are very colorful and in their views, and also it's important too to push that within partisan politics, that there has to be room for people to have different views. Like maybe you largely are you know, side with a lot of the Democrat philosophy, but maybe there's a few things that you disagree with, but there's, you know, that you'll be ostracized if you express those views, and that's wrong. And
yeah,
or if you're a Republican, it's like, hey, there's room for that, and there ought to be, because people aren't like hive minds necessarily, and but that's a huge problem, because also too along with that comes what I've seen as sort of like a dehumanization, to where the other side, which well, whatever it might be, is viewed as not human. Like they're just a bunch of automatons or something. Like, you know, it's just like they've got a human face, but inside they're a robot or whatever. So they're not like an actual human being. And that's, well, you know, you want Hitler, well, that's how you get Hitler. Essentially, dehumanization is such a huge problem, and because it also too, it prevents people from opening up to discussion, and
yeah,
that's something that's needed more than anything, is people to open up and start talking about things, and even if you disagree, to discuss those disagreements and why and stuff, and find out, because it's like many people who have views on things don't just simply have that view because they're part of a club. You know, they have reasons for it. I mean, everything that I believe, I can walk back logically to some kind of origin point. And it's not like I just believe it because that's what I'm expected to believe or something.
right.
Um, I can like justify what I believe with logical arguments and pieces of evidence or whatever. Um, and so, because it's like, you know, you see this all the time in the atheist versus religion discussions, like Christians and stuff, where like they don't actually have an answer. They just say, oh, it's in the Bible or it's God or whatever. And it's like, that's not a sufficient answer, you know,
Yeah.
like you need more than that. And
And
that's
then
what I'm
in
saying.
the reverse direction, it's never a sufficient answer to say like, you know, just because we don't have the answer yet doesn't mean we won't have a scientific explanation for it someday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's not good enough for a religious person to take it at face value either. So
That's true. Yeah, because in their mind, the answer is God.
yeah,
And so if you don't have an answer, then it's probable
yeah,
that it's God.
yeah. Why are you waiting for science? This book says.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. And
well, I
and
mean, it
it's
doesn't say anything about that because that didn't exist back then. But when I interpret it, it definitely says this. Yeah.
mhm. Well, and that's where it's like, even if you're an atheist, it's important. And many atheists that I know, they don't disbelieve in God. They don't say, oh, there definitely is no God. They're just saying, so far there's not enough evidence to support God existing. So they're like still open to God potentially existing. It's just the odds are pretty slim.
Mm,
And yeah, and that's really important I mean, that's a critical thinking kind of thing. And that I think everybody should be in that mindset at all times about everything.
right. I remember early on in the show, we did you interviewed me about atheism,
Yeah.
and a friend of the show commented maybe to you privately. I can't
Yeah,
remember
I think so. Yeah.
that I'm not a real atheist because I said, well, maybe there could be a God. I just operate as if there isn't one.
Yeah.
I was like, well, what more do you want of me? Like, I would be a complete idiot to say that there's definitely no God because I would be saying that without evidence to
which is no
to the
different than
point, like,
which is no different than what the religious people do.
yeah,
It's like,
it's all it is a null hypothesis.
yep.
It's like, okay, um, if this is true and that is true, there would be a God. If not, null hypothesis is true.
Hmm.
There is no God. You
Yeah.
just operate on that, but
Hmm.
the null hypothesis is such that someday it could be proven wrong.
Well, what it is, the null hypothesis is not confirmation of inexistence.
Right.
It's just
Think of it like
basically,
acquittal. It's not the same as innocent.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It basically is just essentially nullifying a particular proposition.
Right. Yeah.
So you could say,
This
yep,
hypothesis was wrong. So for the moment, we go with this assumption.
exactly, which
That's
is
all it is.
the scientific way.
Yeah.
And yeah, because you can't just say, oh,
Like,
yeah,
gravity, by the way, operates on a null hypothesis.
true.
You know,
Yeah. We call it a force, but it may not be a force. It's like there's, yeah, and that's okay. It's okay to live in like ambiguity, I think.
hmm
That's fine as long as you're logical about it and honest about it
Yeah,
and still open.
some of these things we'll probably never have definitive answers for.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we supposed to do? Like continue with the fairy tale explanation of things, or go with what the evidence is pointing to?
Exactly. Yeah. That's I agree. And see, this actually is connected
Yeah,
as always. And I love our path of discussion, how we kind of touch on so many different things that are all sort of connected to the initial talking point. Yeah, it's but and that's yeah, I think, well, and in analyzing things, that we need to do it in that way. Um, I think, and not get carried away with myths and uh like just conjecture, and or whatever, like just what somebody says. And again, there's that statement, like extraordinary statements require extraordinary proof,
yep,
so it's like the more outlandish something is, well, okay, that seems crazy. Like i
yeah.
think i think I'm going to need a little more evidence before I start believing that to be possible or not possible.
I've
That
even seen
too.
situations where both sides of an argument think that the other one is making the more outlandish statement.
Yep.
So it's
Yeah.
like, then what?
Well, you might need like third party intervention at that point, somebody who's not immersed in that discussion to look
Yeah.
at the 2 points and weigh them. But that's really hard because how do you have like there's so many things that are polarized and things you don't really rarely is there a neutral party. AI AI maybe that's a good way to settle a
Maybe.
disagreement or to maybe start questioning what you're thinking is true.
I I do approach AI with some measure of skepticism still because there are people programming it. I feel like it would be a, a necessity to have constant scientific study into the objectivity
Mhm.
of each, at least main player in the AI realm.
That this is very true, yeah, because they can easily manipulate things. And of
Yeah,
course we have to keep in mind when it comes to AI looking at the world around us, it's been trained with whatever information is available out there, and maybe
yeah.
it has incomplete information or false information. There how many times has AI said like, oh, you know for stomach health it's important to eat rocks or something like that. When people ask it questions, it's like, yeah, it's just it's pulling from somewhere where and it isn't wise. It's just looking at the data it's fed. So garbage in, garbage out. Classic programming saying, Um, and so,
Well,
yeah, but
now there's these movements to like purposely poison AI
huh, what for?
with um so like
Mm-hmm.
artworks and music works. I haven't looked into how they exactly plan to do this, but they want to kind of feed in a bunch of garbage or something so that any AI produced art or music is just total crap or like totally ridiculous. I don't really understand. Like, I think eventually we should do an episode with maybe have Rachel on because she's a painter
Mm-hmm.
and get her perspective on this whole thing about like the idea of AI like co-opting art. Like
Mm-hmm.
as far as I can tell, they aren't grabbing entire pieces and then calling them their own. They're just deriving from
Yes.
other works.
Well,
And
it's how you train. I mean, see, and I've gotten in discussions with artists about this very thing, and this does kind of apply to what we're talking about with AI. Um, and some people have said, "Oh, yeah, it made like an exact thing of something that I did." And well, while that may be true, that isn't how AI works. It isn't like doing a Google search and looking at your shit and like lifting it and slapping it down as its own. It's been trained in various things. Like when I took art classes, especially in college, um, we were I took a painting class, right? And I just struggled with this because I had developed my own kind of style and I had to kind of break that, which was really hard. But the teacher was wanting us to like, okay, this for this week or whatever, we're going to paint in this style. And so we would look at like a bunch of artists who painted in a style, or we'd like learn a particular artist's way of painting and then kind of replicate that. And
yeah,
that's how you learn. That is so it's like that's how humans learn. Like you don't just come out suddenly an artist. A lot of
right.
people like begin by tracing and then coloring and then they'll start copying a design or whatever and eventually they'll kind of work it in like it'll get worked into their own way of doing things and that's how everybody learns and that is how AI learns. So I do, yeah, I think like when you're talking people who are currently alive today, it might be good to kind of lock that down to where you can't say, oh, make me a song in the style of Ed Sheeran or something like that, But if it was somebody from the past, like, oh, how about a Beethoven song, something that sounds like Beethoven's work, or something that looks like Picasso. That's okay because That's a long time ago. They're not going to be harmed by it. They're dead, you know?
Remember in Star Trek: The Next Generation when I forget what episode this was, but Data was rehearsing for a violin concert or something,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like, "Yeah, I'm basing my performance on these three pieces as they were performed by these three artists." And so it's like he had very specific examples, which he was just emulating verbatim, but like a blend of the three
Yeah,
verbatim. So like it really becomes a new thing at that point.
it does. Yes,
And
absolutely.
and even back then, before AI was even like something that was being talked about, that was like something Star Trek touched on.
I know, I know. They're so
And
ahead of their time.
yeah, and I never once thought, oh, that's a fucking ripoff. You know,
Mhm.
like
Well, and
if anything, it's
you
more
could,
like a cover or
yeah,
something,
a cover is because it's performed by
I mean,
different
all
people.
classical music performances are cover songs.
Covers,
Let's
yes.
let's be
Mhm.
clear about that. Like,
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's you could talk about that with like appropriation in music or whatever, sampling. Like how many rap songs and techno songs and stuff like that pulled samples from things and then slapped a beat or a rap or whatever on top of it. Like, yeah, that's a new work. Yes, it's using pieces of other people's things, but it's a new work
yeah,
fashioned from. It's kind of like when you take a magazine and you cut things out and then you glue them all down to create a new thing, a collage or something. Same thing. Like, yeah, okay, you didn't take those photographs, you didn't draw the drawings, but you assembled them in a new way.
what's disturbing is these streaming services are really trying to crack down on AI generated music,
Mm-hmm.
and in doing so, they're beginning to get to the point where they won't allow monetization of anything that uses any kind of sample or get this like a any kind of DAW like Fruity Loops or FL Studio
Really?
because the synthesizers that you use to create the sounds in that DAW were made by somebody else. I
But
was like,
that
what?
argument is so ridiculous because you could follow that logic and say, well, oh yeah, that band that's using that particular guitar, that's that like I made that guitar, so therefore that sound is my sound, not yours.
Yeah.
Like,
And
how bullshit is that?
I had I was uploading my album coming out soon. Uh and I I had to change something, so I took the release down and then I was re-uploading it. And then now mind you, it had already been accepted and it was about to go to all these stores like Spotify and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I took it down and I re-uploaded it. And then it was all like, we took your release down, the whole thing, because one song was AI generated. And I was like, the
What?
fuck?
Huh.
Um, and so I emailed them. I don't think they ever even responded to me after this. Um, well, no, they did. I was like, yeah, I submitted a song and then I took it down and I had to fix something. I don't even think it was the song itself. It was like metadata or something.
No.
And I re-uploaded it and then it said it was AI and he was like, "Oh yeah, all you have to do is take a screen recording with audio of the program you use to create that music so that we can confirm that you made the music." And I was like, "No, fuck you. Like I'm insulted
Yeah.
and I shouldn't have to prove with that much amount of effort that I wrote this song that you already fucking approved once."
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
like
and so, but
whatever
that's
system they're using is not a human.
no.
So like their shit is flawed and they're making me do extra human labor to prove that my shit wasn't AI. Like, fuck you.
One might say genetic flaw.
Yeah.
Well, and because that's stupid, because then it doesn't allow you to do revisions
Hmm.
or a mix, right? Because like a lot of people who do electronic music, they'll have multiple versions
Yeah.
of the same song. So maybe they'll use slightly different synths or drums or whatever, different backing vocals or modify it in some way. And I, oh, and see, this is where this goes into the whole. I mean, obviously, we're kind of off topic here, but it's interest. It's still interesting. But it's like this is where copyright is bullshit. Like
Yeah.
it stifles development. That's where, and patents the same way. It's like they're so you know so non-moving, right? Like just a stone. Like they don't want to move at all. No wiggle room, no nuance, because they're just so into following the letter of the law, hardcore.
Even if you use AI to make music, I don't give a fuck. Like
Yeah.
people are complaining that there's AI music on Spotify and it's blah 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 and it's like taking like it's competition or something. It's like, you
Yeah.
know what? Like if it's competition, if it's good enough to be competition, let it be. You
Yeah.
know, but the fact of the matter is like if the AI itself isn't holding a copyright,
Mm-hmm.
fucking what's the problem? Like
Yeah.
if if I uploaded AI made music and it was straight up copying a copyrighted song, yeah, of
Mm-hmm.
course you would take that down. And I
Yeah.
would be like, okay, I got caught. But if
Mm-hmm.
I was like, AI, make me a song that invokes emotions of melancholy with touches of humor and utilizes the style of Tchaikovsky and Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's like nobody's ever done something like that before.
Nope.
AI makes it for me.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna say that that's not like art?
Yeah. Well, and
Even
it's
even if I didn't manually choose notes or anything like that, like I had a vision, I used a tool, whether it's a synthesizer or a guitar that I'm strumming or
Mhm.
AI, it's my creation.
Well, yeah, because and it's still art. It's derivative, as
Mhm.
all art is. There is
Who
no
built the
original art.
guitar? Who made the
Well,
strings?
and
Like
that's what I was about to get at. It's like if they're going to get that nitpicky about these things, then you might as well follow it to its logical conclusion, which is the only way you can hold a copyright to music is if you bought all the electrical parts and soldered together your own synthesizer and programmed it. You cut down a tree and cut out the body of the guitar and the neck, and you cut machined it down and built everything. You built it all by yourself. Like
yeah.
that's the only way. Like
I
oh,
altered the
and
law of physics to modulate a new frequency of sound that nobody has ever used before.
yeah, exactly. It's like I think it's just highlighting the absurdity of it all. That
Mhm.
like maybe we should just give up on the whole copyright thing and just kind of let things be, you know?
I'm smelling a new alter ego story where
What's
instead
that?
of the sawtooth and the sine and the square wave, we come up with the Mobius wave. It's
Nice. That's yeah, we need to do more of those stories.
like,
You know what we need actually is this would be fun. If we could probably go onto Fiverr maybe and find somebody who does voice work and we give them the story and have them read it. So it's like, and we just always go to them. So it's like, this one person that always reads out these stories or something, like either as a bedtime story or as like somebody in the news. We could probably have AI do that too, actually, but
yeah.
that'd be
Well,
hilarious.
I did on this album, I did utilize AI to create voices of alternate like bit characters
Hmm.
because it's a concept album and there's like little skits here and there.
Yeah.
And so, of course, like I ended up doing two different characters myself,
Hmm.
the main characters of the story. But then there was like a female main character, kind of like a side character, not in it that often.
Hmm.
And for that, I had my stepdaughter do some vocals. But
Hmm.
then everything else, where there's like a secretary on the phone, or a nurse or
Hmm.
something handing the doctor a report or whatever, all that stuff's AI generated. TV
Yeah.
commercials and stuff like that, all that's AI generated, and it
Mhm.
sounds like real humans.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
And
but
it's a
by
use.
the way, the one song that they sent back saying it was AI had no AI in it. Just making that clear.
That's irony
The
right
the
there.
ones that did have AI, they were like, okay, yeah, sounds
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. Off you go.
So
That's
that tells you
hilarious.
enough right there. Like,
That is hilarious. I This is actually, I kind of like what we're doing here because this is almost like after hours.
yeah,
Like we finished the main conversation and now we're just off on a different little tangent that sort of spawned from the conversation.
it's so weird the directions we go sometimes. Like,
I know. Well, and I think that's one thing that makes our show kind of special is how we have views and opinions and knowledge about a great many things.
mhm.
We're not one sided at all. And yeah,
Well, and especially like on the third beer or so, we really start making more sense, I think.
exactly. Yeah.
Or or maybe it's the exact opposite, and it just
We
seems
just,
that way to
we,
us.
yeah, we think we're making more sense.
The
Although,
viewers should probably try to keep up with us on the beer because that's where you're really on the same wavelength, you know?
yep, exactly. Yeah, totally. Oh,
I
man.
wonder which season my liver will give out.
Is that, are we
I
going to
think
take have a little poll or,
I'm getting close. I'm starting to notice anytime I drink beer, I feel really horrible the next day. Even like I'm not getting drunk or hangovers or anything. Like I'm just not feeling right.
oh,
Uh,
yeah.
might have to stop drinking.
Ugh.
Ugh.
Yeah, perish the thought.
Yeah,
Oh, man. Yeah, well, this was a really good. We covered a lot of stuff in this
yeah,
one. We're about an hour and 30 so minutes in. Yeah, this is good.
yeah. Well, definitely want to direct people to our products because we have swag now that we can sell, and um, we've got a couple items on there. I made a tote bag for your Tacoma prepper thing,
Oh, nice.
a prepper bag.
That's cool. Right on.
So you should probably do a video where you fit stuff into
Yeah.
your prepper bag.
That's a good idea, actually. Oh, that's, yeah. I'll have to get one then.
Um, I made like an abolish ICE
Hmm.
shirt and hoodie, like about how like we're all humans, we should help each other out and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we should just every time we come up with a cool idea on the show where we're like, that should be a shirt, now we can just make it a shirt.
Make it a
So
shirt. Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
and
And I
oh,
think,
you know what? We would be remiss not to mention that on June 11th we lost two great artists, the frontman of Nitzareb
mhm.
and Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
huge influence on my writing. Even on this particular album, there was a couple of songs where I was really thinking like, what would Brian Wilson do with the harmony here?
Hmm.
Um, like he was a fucking genius.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
hands down, like
Oh,
otherworldly. I don't
yeah.
know.
No
Like,
kidding.
yeah, I am really glad I got to see him live
Oh, nice.
um, about 5, 6 years ago.
Hmm.
Doing like a lot of the pet sound stuff
Yeah.
and the zombies opened up for them.
Oh, dude.
So that was super cool.
Nice.
Uh, it was like being a kid again, listening to the 97.3 oldies
Hmm.
station.
Yep. Which I think is now, yeah, it's a talk radio.
or country or
or
something.
country. Yeah, I mean, the stations keep changing all the time.
Country talk radio.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. Yeah, well, I don't know. We didn't really have any comments, but after the fact, you can always leave comments down below and tell us what
Yep.
you think. Any ideas? Tell us what we got right, got wrong, whatever. Yeah,
Yep.
cool. Well,
All right. Well, it's time to empty my bladder. So,
yep. So I guess we will bid you all farewell. Yes. Let's see. So how'd you turn this off then?
yeah, I think we're ended. Yeah.
Okay.